everybody for tuning in to Coda Conversations once again. Tonight we have Todd Thompson, award-winning film director, producer, writer, actor, filmmaker, and much more. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on, and I'm here with my co-host Brian.
I'm Brian Russick, professional drummer, drum teacher based out of Suffolk County, Long Island, New York. I can be found on the web at brianrussick.com.
Awesome. So yeah, Todd, you have a very impressive background, a man of many talents. So we typically like to start the show off with the guest giving an introduction to our audience. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I was born and raised. I'm going to start back from the beginning, huh? I guess the highlights. I'm from Cleveland. Born and raised in Cleveland. Grew up there. Went to school there. Graduated from Cleveland, Akron University, actually, and which is about 15 minutes outside of Cleveland. But yeah, man, I had a very traditional Midwest sort of upbringing. Tight family. Spent a lot of time with my grandparents. Which was great. I have to, as far as how I got into film, I could tell you at a young age, my father took me to see Star Wars when I was 7, and man, I was like just hooked.
Oh hell yeah!
I literally,
yeah.
Now that I'm a father myself, I could probably honestly say I probably drove my parents crazy that whole year after seeing that movie. I mean, I to this day I remember sitting around the dinner table and just like, Dad, what about this character? Why did this happen? Or who was that? I mean, you don't realize it until, years later when you're looking back, but I was actually, dissecting the story in the only way I knew how, and what now to me is story beats and, archetypes and character types and hero's journey kind of stuff. I was just, at a young age, 7 years old, I was like pelting my parents with this every dinner. I'm surprised they didn't cancel family
That's funny.
dinner. Yeah, it was literally the conversation. It was our conversation for a year at the table. I mean, no doubt. And then
for a whole year,
for at least a whole year, at least. And then on top of all that, I'll never forget like this one trip over to my grandma's house. My grandparents just bought this new house, and my mom took me over to see it. And my grandma pulled out this little gift she bought me at the store, and it was my first Star Wars action figure. It was Darth Vader, and like that started this terrible addiction to where like at my ripe old age at this time, I'm still buying these action figures.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I don't want to get into that here. It's like that'll be another podcast. But yeah, that's the deal. But I got
cool.
hooked, and I grew up. My aunt and uncle owned a movie theater in this little Bedford Falls town called Medina, and so every Friday night after school, my grandparents would pick me up. We'd go for like this delicious little steak dinner, and then we'd end up at the theater. And as I got older, I used to watch all the movies from the projection booth. This like 350-pound man named Big Charlie used to run the projectors, and I would help him. I would spot I don't know if you guys remember, but like there would be a little glitch in the corner that would signify the change of a reel. So my job was to like sit on the stool and look through this little tiny square watching the movie. And then as soon as I saw the glitch, I would tell Big Charlie, and that would be his signal to like change out the reels and
change it
out.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's kind of my introduction to film. And then I got into BMX freestyle in the grade school, going into high school, which ended up lasting through my sophomore year of college. I guess I rode BMX freestyle, and then for a company out of Huntington Beach, California.
That's unique.
Yeah, I was based in Midwest area, but I was sponsored and rode for them. They were based
wow. You must have been pretty good then, huh?
I didn't do competition. I did a lot of just performances, a lot of shows, a lot of high school shows, like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, Students Against Drunk Driving.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
A lot of local parade. We'd always get called for the parades, and I was primarily a flatland rider. I did a little ramp work, but yeah. So my full name is Jeffrey Todd Thompson, spelled Jeffrey with a G, and the bicycle that I rode was a GT. So it fit nice.
Very nice.
That's an old brand, but and so all that kind of led me to studying marketing and advertising in college. And one of my bicycle sponsors was a surf company based out of Huntington Beach, originally from Maui. They were called Island Gecko Maui, and I got to learn the fashion business through them. And I kind of went into my professional career thinking I was going to be a clothing designer and like own a line of clothes, actually. And I did in college. I started a line of clothing called the CB's Expedition Company, which was kind of a cross between Banana Republic and surfwear. And we had I was going to school, taking classes, coming back, running the business. We were running a fashion line out of our dorm room. We were selling around campus. We ended up with I think about 12 or 14 stores in the Midwest area that sold our line of clothing. So imagine walking into like a little tiny dorm room and there's just boxes and boxes of, we had basically turned our dorm room into a warehouse and we were shipping
Yeah.
stuff out of there. So it was
Awesome.
pretty cool. It was kind of, kind of dive in and get your hands dirty kind of experience, learn the ropes as you go. So made a lot of mistakes along the way, of course.
Like that's some real entrepreneurship.
Yeah, it was fun. And then, it's like
Yeah.
you go on summer break and you're at like the local amusement park or you're on vacation and you see somebody wearing your shirt or your design, you're like, oh, it's me,
Yeah, yeah.
So that was pretty cool.
That's
But
exciting.
yeah, it all led me to getting a job at Disney here in Orlando, which is why I'm based in Orlando now. And I was with Disney for about 21 years doing originally marketing and advertising, but as the world turned digital and as we went from like, we migrated online, I really got into producing for them and directing, and I got back into filmmaking too. By the way, I started directing and producing short films. I started volunteering for the Florida Film Festival, just kind of doing everything I could to network and just kind of get into that world. It's a very difficult world to break into, and a lot of it's just connections and contacts and longevity. Having staying power. For the long term, just like anything in life, I guess,
Being consistent, right?
Yeah, being consistent, being true to yourself, having faith in who you are, being unapologetic in a way. A lot of people,
Yeah.
It's one of those businesses where it's like, oh, pick me, you want to be accepted, but and I don't know if we're allowed to swear on the show, but if you don't give enough, then you're good to go because you don't care what people think. You just go for it.
Yeah.
And it's usually like the way to handle it because otherwise, you're always asking for permission or looking for acknowledgement somewhere, and that just doesn't get you very far.
Praise or validation.
Yeah. So
like
I didn't really. I wasn't the type of person that really needed that my whole life. I was always in some sort of like performing type role, but I wasn't doing it. I was doing it for the love of it, not the acknowledgement or recognition from it. If that makes any sense.
And yeah, that's to me that's what is important. Like as a drummer, drum teacher, I have so much passion when I get into a lesson with a student and I show them something for the first time and then they play it back to me. I'm like, yeah, you got it. There's a lot of joy in that.
100%. Yeah. 100%. There's almost like more joy giving than there is receiving.
Giving. Yeah. Giving.
Yeah. You get a bigger payback, I think, sometimes.
Yeah, it seems like over your career, the theme is that you never allowed yourself to be put in a box because there's all these drastically different things that you're doing, BMX, marketing. Now you ended up in film producing. Like, what made you stick in that lane?
My playlist on my phone too, by the way, reflects that. So like, if I were ever to die and somebody found my playlist, like they would get everything from the Nutcracker Suite to Metallica to Anthrax to a lot of film scores on here, a lot of R&B, a lot of hip hop. I mean, I just got a pretty eclectic playlist going on, so they'll never be able to pin me down. Like, who was this guy?
So, like, how did you get into producing your first film? What was that first opportunity like?
Well, I started when I was a little kid, and it started off after my dad took me to see Star Wars. I've always been a writer. I was always writing stories and making books when I was a kid. And I had a little library in my bedroom in the closet. Like I used to make my parents check out books, back in the day. So I would start writing my own stuff and I would cast, kids in the neighborhood and we would rehearse all day and then have all the parents come down after dinner outside we'd set up chairs outside our garage and our garage would be our stage. And we would, get dressed and do all our stuff inside the garage and then come out. There would be a curtain up or something and we would do the performance out front. And it was kind of twisted because like, again, I'm coming from a movie background. So like in my mind, everything has to play sequentially, so God forbid anybody makes a mistake, like 3/4 of the way through the play. A lot of times I would stop and say, no, we got to start over. It's got to be perfect. So these parents were watching these plays like for hours a night, like being patient with me as I put on my little performances. But yeah, when I got to Florida, I was grown up in a wiser individual of how it all works, I guess. I ran into a buddy who was a production coordinator on a TV show called Tarzan Epic Adventures. And it was a very short-lived show. And there was an actor named Nick Nicholas Worth in it. I remember him. I spent the evening with him on set one night, and his claim to fame was the movie No Way Out with Kevin Costner. He played the one of the KGB agents, but he was in the show. And then the guy that played Tarzan, yeah, you guys can look it up. It was called Tarzan Epic Adventures. But the guy that played Tarzan was a super cool guy. I read that he and his wife and a bunch of friends got killed in a plane accident, like on vacation somewhere. So that was my first show. I was like a background extra on that show, and that got me just hooked and loving set. And the casting director from that show was casting Roseanne. Roseanne was coming to Disney, so I got to be on an episode of Roseanne. And then the same casting director gets to know you. Again, you kind of get to know people in the business. That's how you break in. And there was a big John Singleton movie coming to town called Rosewood. So I immediately wrapped up Roseanne, and no sooner, maybe a week or two went by, and I was getting fitted for Rosewood, which I don't know if you are familiar with the film, but it was based on a true story. It takes place in 1912, I believe, and it was a black town in Florida called Rosewood, Florida, and there was a white town like literally right next door called Sumter, and there was the black people in Rosewood were living a whole lot better than the people in Sumter. I mean, for whatever reason. And there was a lot of jealousy and animosity. And it turns out that there was a woman in Sumter having an affair with a man. And at the same time it came to light, there was a black man that got released from prison, escaped from prison rather, and from a chain gang, and was wandering the woods and ended up in Rosewood. And so it gave the white people an excuse on New Year's Eve to burn this town to the ground and basically massacre the town. And so John Singleton did this pretty epic film about it. It had a huge cast. It was John Voight, Ving Rhames played the chain gang guy. Don Cheadle was in it. It was oh my God, I'm so sorry, I'm gonna forget her name. Eartha Kitt, not Eartha Kitt. Who's the lady that played the Jeffersons, the black woman?
I can't remember off the top of my head.
I'm so sorry, I'm forgetting. Anyways, she was in it. She was amazing. Michael Rooker was in it. He
sounds like an amazing opportunity.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. So I literally spent a month on that set. And keep in mind, like, I'm working for Disney full time. So like I've got a 9-to-5 job, and then at night, all these Rosewood shoots were at night. So I would literally go from a 9-to-5 job. I would jump in the car. I'd drive out to Sanford, which is about an hour away, and spend the night in the woods. And it was wintertime, so it was cold, but we would just be shooting our scenes every day, all day. And then I would get up, I would shower in the morning, and then I would head right into work the next day. So I was going like no sleep for about a month.
I mean, to me, that's real work ethic.
It's devotion, I'll tell you that.
Elbow grease, yeah.
Yeah, because I wasn't at Disney long enough to like have a whole lot of vacation time stored up. Like by the time I left Disney, I had like 6 weeks, so I could spend as much time as I wanted on a film set. But at the time, I had a couple personal days to use, and then like maybe a week, and so that time gets eaten up quick. So you gotta just coordinate your time and pick your projects pretty diligently. Otherwise, you're out of time. So luckily, Rosewood was all nighttime shoots, and it was a great experience. I mean, it was crazy to film that because we're filming, we're burning down houses, we're whipping people, we're shooting people, and then we break and go have lunch together. It's just. It was twisted. It was twisted to like, be in that world and be in that mindset during production. And then like when you're on break, you're breaking bread and just talking about life and joking. And it's just weird that, thank God we're not in that anymore, in a lot of ways. I know things aren't perfect in the world, but when you think back to history like that, I'm glad we're not there anymore. But that film was an amazing.
Oh, did that movie really bring the experience of like racism to life? Like it made it a lot more real than just like the history books.
Yeah, but I mean, like to me, it's a different generation for me, right? I didn't grow up in a racial home, and I didn't grow up in a racial society in Cleveland. So like to me, it just came off as stupidity, really. Like I mean, like these people were acting ridiculous. I mean, you go see the movie. I mean, it's all based on this husband. And blaming and just coincidentally blaming somebody who's passing through town, and it ruined everybody. I mean, families lost everybody. I mean, as part of the settlement when the film was being made, the families finally got some sort of settlement from the state of Florida Ironically, my entertainment attorney now, Greg Galloway, he actually handled the case for the settlement when they were making the film. So he was very attuned to it, and he kind of gave me a lot of inside
Oh,
backstories.
wow. Interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of funny how that all worked out. And we met later on in life. But
Interesting.
oh, you know what? Her name was Esther Roll. Remember her? Esther Roll was the black woman that was like the matriarch of town Rosewood, and man, she was just a phenomenal actress. She died a few years later after that film came out, but it was one of her last roles. And you watch that movie, and she just shines in that movie. She's just phenomenal.
That's awesome.
Well, that's amazing hearing about that. So after that movie experience, did you do any other movies?
Yeah. So one thing leads to another. So I wrapped up Rosewood. I started taking classes down here and just getting perfecting my craft, if you will. Getting to know that whole world a little bit more. And again, you get to know the casting directors, you get to know the people involved, and so Rosewood led to a movie called Contact with Jodie Foster and Matthew McConaughey. I was a
Oh,
reporter.
I love that movie.
Yeah, well, that's great. It was a great film. I spent we spent
Movie.
most of my time at NASA on that one. We were
Oh, wow.
in the press scenes for that. And then I'm trying to just kind of go sequentially. I did another space series with Tom Hanks called From Earth to the Moon that they shot at Disney. That was convenient because it was right on the back lot where I worked, and I was cast as a reporter in one of those episodes, and got to be around production the whole time. So it was pretty neat. And I don't know if you remember that series, but it had a whole bunch of people in it. Chris Isaac was in it, Daniel Hugh Kelly, Bill Paxton was in it, Ron Howard's brother was in it. It was every episode had Jay Moore. I was in my scenes were with Jay Moore and another gentleman that I can't remember his name. I don't know why I'm drawing blanks on people's names tonight, but it was great, and you cross paths with all these people all the time now, and it's a very small world. So, and funny enough, on Rosewood, I worked with Michael Rooker. In college, my go-to movie during finals week and pretty much every week was Tombstone. And Michael Rooker was in Tombstone. He played a cowboy. And so we grew up watching that. I worked with him on Rosewood. And then it wasn't until like my son was born 16 years later that I was in a movie with him up in Wilmington called Bolden. And we actually shared a house together. We became like really good friends. So I've been friends with Michael for 20 years now. And it's just funny how our paths crossed many times. And then we ended up becoming really close friends, So I think it's been one of the most rewarding things is just, having great friendships and being around creative people. I love creative people. I love people that think outside the box, see something a way nobody else sees it. It's pretty cool. That's if nothing else, that's like the biggest blessing I think in my life is just to be able to collaborate with amazing people, amazing, talented people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So kind of diving back into your creativity, your writing, like back then when you were creating your own films, did you like create a universe or was it more like one-off stories, say like a Marvel universe?
No, I started, I made a couple like experimental shorts, let's call them, and just to kind of get my feet wet in the production space. And then I started, because of my volunteering at the Florida Film Festival, I wrote a film called Time and Again. And it was a 20-minute short film, but it's basically a story of an old man who fixes up this clock that's been in their family for years, and he presents it to his wife for their anniversary. And his wife is very sick; she's dying. She won't be with us much longer, and her only regret is that she never got to see the ocean. So he presents his clock to her, and then she wants him to put it on the mantle. So he takes it downstairs and winds it up. And as he winds it up, he realizes time goes in reverse. Like something's going on with the time continuum, and he realizes he can control time with this clock. And that night, he always plays the lottery. He loses the lottery, but he goes back and takes the clock back, and the lottery show starts again. So he runs out and buys another ticket, wins the lottery, goes up to tell his wife the good news, and she's of course dead. So what he does is he finds a way to he can't take her to the ocean, but he finds a way to bring the ocean to her in a very creative way. And so he takes time back so that he can have that last moment with his wife. So the message is, he couldn't get more time with his wife, but he wanted to make the most of the time that he had.
Yeah.
So that was a cool little short. And so I got to cast a really great actor named Seymour Cassell in that role. He's an Academy Award nominated actor, been in hundreds of movies. and he's not with us anymore, unfortunately. But became really good friends with him, and he agreed to be in my first short film, basically, and that kind of kicked off this series of shorts. To go back to your question, where I created these like sort of like life lesson stories. You know, none of them were related story wise, but they were thematically themed. You know, together in a group. And the next one was a short film called Once Not Far From Home, about this little boy who walks home from school every day past this scary old looking house. And one day he sees this little girl in the front yard and falls in love. And every day after that, he brings little gifts to her, flowers. He brings a box of butterflies. It's a really sweet little, serenade, if you will, between this little boy and this house. And he only sees the girl one time. But then as the story comes to an end, you realize that there was an old woman that lived at the house, and he was actually bringing her. He was kind of like bringing her these gifts on the last final days of her life. And so the girl he never sees again, but these gestures were just kind little gestures to let her know that she was still cared for. You know, and I told the whole story with no dialogue. It was all told through music. And I needed, and it's a beautiful little film. And I needed a great face to play the little boy. And while, again, volunteering at the Florida Film Festival, there was a film playing that starred this little kid from a TV series called Malcolm in the Middle. His name was Eric Persullivan. He played Dewey.
Malcolm in the Middle. Yeah, I remember
great
that.
Show. Yeah, great show. And Eric's just got this face, he's got these ears, and he's just adorable. And so I cut this picture out of the program from the Florida Film Festival years before, and I wrote in my scrapbook, I said, I keep a journal, and I'm like, I love this kid's face. I want to work with him someday. And so 3-4 years later, he's coming to Orlando, and he's the star of my little silent film, if you will.
What do you know? Yeah. Wow.
And I got to work with James Best on that film. He played Roscoe from Dukes of Hazzard, and Daniel Hugh Kelly. He's been in many TV shows in the 80s. I was in the film, and Brett Rice, who was the train conductor in Rosewood. He and I are good friends, and he lives in Florida here, and he's a big time working actor. Brett's been in everything. It's been fun, and then my third short film in the series was called This Man's Life, about a guy who has to go home and settle his father's estate and hates traveling and hates going home. And when he gets on this train, he encounters this guy who knows everything about his life, and they relive his life on the train. It's almost like a Christmas Carol in reverse. And it all takes place in the confines of this train. And so Michael Rooker plays the guy going home to see his dad. And then I met and became friends with Bill Cobbs, who recently passed away last year, but he was a black actor from Cleveland, believe it or not, big character actor. And he agreed to come down. And so we had a great time. We spent 5 days on a little moving train in Mount Dora, Florida. And we had like 2 miles of track. We would go up and down for like days and just shoot all these scenes inside the train. It was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
So, it was fun. So I started off that way as far as directing and producing. And then while I'm doing all that and my day job at Disney, I'm finding myself producing and directing a lot of like commercial type content for them. So it worked out to where, my professional life and my artistic life sort of blended together in a very nice way. And just kind of became the story of who I am and what I do.
And so let me ask this, Todd, what would you say the main influence is for your writing style, or just, your writing in general?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I have to say, I'm influenced by Spielberg, or, 1980s Spielberg type stuff, E.T., Poltergeist, those types of movies that when he was just kind of getting started, those movies that had a great heart and soul to them and had great character development. I was definitely influenced by him. I grew up, loving Frank Capra. My grandfather is Italian, and he loved Frank Capra. And ironically enough, on some of the projects I worked on, I got to go to Wilmington, North Carolina, and Screen Gem Studios was run by Frank Capra Jr., Frank's son. So I became good friends with him, and he was just a great guy to know. I mean, we would go to dinner with he was in partnership with these three big casting directors up in North Carolina, the Fincannons, and Mark and Craig are brothers, and Craig's married to Lisa May, and they casted me in a lot of films over the years and different projects. So, being up there, I was working on Dawson's Creek, for example, or I worked on The Green Mile, or we shot the movie Bolden twice. That's another interesting story. But every time I go up there, we'd go to dinner with Frank and hear all the great stories. And I mean, he's just got amazing stories growing up. His father was friends with Walt Disney, and
Wow.
his father gave Walt the idea for Dumbo. And so I got to hear that story around the dinner table. And then his godfather was Clark Gable. So, it's just stuff like that,
Randomness.
little
Yeah.
random things like that,
Awesome.
But yeah, it was cool. It was a good time. So my influence are those kind of stories, those people, those types of stories that people wrote that I think, address life situations. They're about the everyman hero, but they're put in some sort of supernatural situation to where things can be different, things can change. So, and I think it speaks a lot to my personality too.
Yeah, it seems like one of the running themes throughout those stories is like the temporality of life. Like,
Yeah,
it's not forever, so make the best of it.
and second chances is a big theme for me. Forgiveness, true love. Like, what is true love? What does that really mean? Those kinds of themes, things that, again, I think some of the most successful films are the films that we watch the most or gravitate the most to, are those about life situations that we can all relate to. When we all come from different backgrounds and different stories, but at the core, we're all kind of the same people. We all get turned on by the same things. We get turned off by the same things. We have sensitivities. We have emotions, triggers, emotional triggers. And if you, my kids are getting ready to go to college, and I was like, I think you should at least minor in psychology, because if you can understand the human mind, I think you can really go far in life.
Yeah.
Understand how people think and how they operate.
Yeah, that's huge. I took in college, I only went for a year or two, just took like mainly general courses. I took a class called Psychology of Men, and I was the only guy in the whole classroom. It was all women.
That's not a bad ratio. I hope you enjoyed that class.
Yeah, I wasn't complaining.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, no, it's important. The human mind is a fascinating thing.
So yeah, like what is your idea of true love? Like, I know some people think it's a feeling, but to me it goes beyond feeling. It's more of a sacrifice ultimately. But what about you?
It's funny you say the word sacrifice. Yeah, I mean, it's honestly, I mean, what is true love? I mean, it's a commitment, I mean, that you're not gonna, first of all, nobody's perfect. And you got to truly be committed to somebody's baggage, somebody's DNA. Let's put it that way. Let's call it DNA. Everyone's got DNA they bring to the table, and some of it's, you're born with it. Some of it's, inherited, informed by the lifestyle that you grew up in, and some of it can be reshaped and reformed depending on the type of life you want to live. But people meet each other all the time, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationships, even friendships. And brotherhood and sisterhood, it's like a true love is like when you build up a tolerance for somebody where it doesn't matter, how you feel about it doesn't matter. You're more concerned about how they feel about it. When you put yourself out there for them in a very selfless way, you're putting them first. You're putting other people first before yourself. And again, it's kind of like when the way we kicked off the conversation. There's kind of a bigger joy in giving than getting, in a way, because ironically, by giving you actually get, and
you get a lot more back, from giving.
Yeah, but it's again,
paradoxical.
It's not the reason you do it, but ironically, like, as an actor, one of the best things you can do is give.
Right.
Seymour told me a funny story. I'll say it online here because she just got nominated for an Oscar and she won the Golden Globe. But Seymour did a movie with Woody Harrelson and Robert Redford and Demi Moore called Indecent Proposal. And Demi was very young in her career time, and they used to call her Gimme More because like she was taking more than giving, I guess. So I wasn't there to witness it, but that's what Seymour would tell me. So, but she's gone on obviously to have this amazing career, and she's really evolved as an actress. But acting is all about giving, and life is all about giving. So for me, true love is giving without expecting anything in return.
Right.
And not taking anything personally, and just not being afraid to put yourself out there and just take it as it comes. As long, but know that, what makes you sleep well at night is knowing that you gave your 110%.
Interesting. It seems like forgiveness ties into that as well. Like you
Yeah.
mentioned, we all come with baggage.
Yeah. And I'm, you're not a perfect person. I'm not a perfect person. I mean, we're going to make mistakes along the way, but, I hope I can always be forgiven for as much as I forgive other people for what they do to me, And I think that's at the core. I mean, love is patient, love is kind,
Mhm.
love doesn't hold any wrongs. I mean, I don't have it memorized, but it's the famous Corinthians verse, and that's written for a reason.
Yeah.
And if you really, and I don't think you understand it until you live it. You got to get to be a certain age where you've experienced life. And I mean, some people are born to be old souls and seem to catch on pretty quick. But for me, for example, it takes me a little while. I needed to live life a little bit to understand things.
Yeah.
A little bit more. So, and you try to impart that on your kids. You try to, save them from some of the heartache and some of the wrong left and right turns you take along the way. But then
falls and all that.
yeah, you try to, but then at the same time, you're like, well, let's also let them fall, because
Maybe
if
they should learn. Yeah, they
yeah, if
should
you
learn
protect them all the
something on
time, they
their
live in this
own.
bubble. Yeah, they live in this bubble. You're really
Yeah.
not doing them any favors, But
Yeah.
but you do. But again, you do it out of love. So,
Yeah.
Right.
But that's a great point, because a lot of parents, especially in our generation, are really overprotective, and they feel like they're doing their kids a solid one. But
yeah,
really, sometimes you need experience. You have to hit your head to really learn.
yeah, 100%, 100%. So true.
So for you, what are some of the lessons that you had to learn through experience before it really solidified?
Oh gosh, I've lived through an addiction. I've lived through a 19-year marriage. I've lived through being a father. I lost all four of my grandparents along the way. I was very lucky to have them for a very long time in my life, though. My grandparents on my mother's side, especially, were very influential to me. Just by the way they lived and treated each other, at least what I saw, as a kid growing up. And my grandpa in particular, he was an immigrant. He was born in America. His name was Amerigo, which is America in Italian. And at 1 year old, his father was like a diehard fascist, so he did not like America at all. And he moved the family back to Italy, and my grandpa grew up there until he was about 12. And money was so tight that they ended up shipping him back to the States. They told him at 12 years old, oh, come, go before us and send money home so we can all afford to come back over there. But really what they were doing is they were just, lessening the household, just one less mouth to feed, basically. But imagine putting your kid, this was 19, he was born in 1912. So this was 1924. Imagine putting your kid on a steamship in steerage and sending him off to America, which is what, like a 4-week journey. There's no phones, there's no texting, there's no way to communicate. You don't know if he's still alive, if he fell overboard. You don't know until he reaches the States if he's okay, and that could take forever with a letter. It's super expensive to make a phone call at that time. And so he landed in Ellis Island at 12 years old, and he had a big, thick head of hair, and he got lice on board the ship. So he got stuck in Ellis Island for another 3 weeks until his uncle was able to pick him up and take him back to a place called Steubenville, Ohio, which is where he grew up. And it's a real small town, on the border of the southern border of Ohio. And he grew up there until he was, late teens, early 20s. And he grew up with Dean Martin. You guys know Dean Martin?
Yeah.
Yeah, he grew up with Dean Martin. He used to play tennis with him. And he and Dino moved to Cleveland together. And then Dean Martin obviously went the performing route, and my grandpa went into like auto workers, and he was an auto worker. He was a welder. He went into more of a skilled trade.
Oh, nice.
But they parted ways. But yeah, he grew up in Steubenville with Dean Martin, and told me a story one time about honesty. I'll tell you the story real quick. It's really cool. He told my mom the story and told us the story growing up. But when he was living in Italy and they were very poor, he was walking home from school one day, and they had, very hungry. He had no money. So he picked an apple from an apple tree in an orchard. He was cutting through some farmer's orchard. And just before he took a bite, he realized he had stolen this apple. So he untied his shoelace and he tied the apple back up on the tree and went home. And then that night, there's this knock on the door. they're having dinner. There's a knock on the door, and the dad answers. And the dad's, again, he's a very stern, very abrupt human being, I guess. I never got a chance to meet him, but he wasn't the nicest guy in the world. And he answers the door, and he goes, "What are you bothering me for? It's dinner time." And there's this farmer standing there, and he says, "Hey, I just came to tell you your son trespassed through my yard, my field today, and I saw him take an apple from my tree." And the dad's about ready to whip my grandpa. And he said, I came to tell you what an honest boy you have. And I saw what he did. He tied the apple back up to the tree, and he presents the family with this bushel of apples, like a whole barrel, a bushel, a whole container of apples, which back then was probably worth God knows how much money. And so he told me the story. And when he died, I was in pieces. Like, my grandpa was everything to me. He lived to be 101, by the way. And so when he died, I got this idea, like, I'm a filmmaker. I should tell his story. So I wrote a story about, I put that in a script. I retold that story in a script. I casted it all on Facebook. I was looking for Italian actors in Florida, and there's just none. There was one guy who came in who was brilliant. But so this is the funny part of the story. I ended up somehow, some way, my Facebook casting reached the Italian club in Tampa. And I casted it 2 days after Christmas that year, whatever year that was. And I had just enough people show up for the roles that I needed for the script. I mean, just enough. And there were some people that showed up and brought their mom and dad, and they just came because they were interested in seeing. But the dad ended up looking just like the farmer I needed, so he became the farmer, and the mom was a woman walking down the street. And there was one kid that showed up, had never acted a day in his life. None of them had, really. And he had this big, thick head of hair, and I'm like, oh, there's my grandpa, so it was also preordained. And we shot for 5 days in Orlando. My grandfather had a sister in Italy, and that was the only role I couldn't cast. But about a week or two later, and also about a week or two before production, so right in the middle there, I got this email from this family, and they said, "Oh, we wanted our daughter to audition, but we were out of town and we missed it." And I said, "Well, it's over, but if you can put her on tape, I'm in Orlando if you want to come over." Blah, blah, blah. I go, "No, we live in Florence. We live in Venice." They lived in Venice. And so they, through this Italian club in Tampa, heard about this movie, wanted to give their daughter a chance to be in a movie. And so they made a family vacation to the States so that she could be in this movie. So it was her first trip to America. She's on a movie set for 5 days. She was great.
Wow.
Everyone was great. It was such a cool story. Yeah, and it turned out great. And so I shot all of it in Orlando. And then my wife and I made a trip to Italy. We had a 10-day trip in Italy. And I wanted to take her to where my grandfather was born. I had only been there one time. When I graduated high school, my graduation gift and my sister's was to go see where my grandfather was born in this little town outside of Rome. And I only been there one time. So my wife and I went over there, and we, did the Rome thing for the first night. And then we got into a rental car and we found this town, and we were there no sooner than like 10, 15 minutes. And like word got around that we were there filming. And we ended up meeting a distant cousin that is related to my grandfather, like while we were there. So it was pretty cool. And now we're, she's connected to me on Facebook and everything. It was pretty cool. But yeah, it was neat. I shot 99% of the film in Orlando, and then I went over to Italy to do my pickup shots, my establishing shots. So when you watch it, it looks like you're in Italy, and the whole movie's in Italian. It's all subtitled. But the apartment is a warehouse over by the Florida Mall, and the orange grove is actually an apple. The apple orchard is actually in Orange Grove, off of Route 27 in Claremont. So we took down all the oranges and we tied apples up to the trees, and it was pretty cool. I mean, it was a very neat experience, but it was, I guess, my way of like saying thanks to my grandpa for everything that he did for me in his life.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've had so many chance meetings in your life.
Yeah, but I'm sure you have too, though, right? Being a drummer, I'm sure you've met some people, right?
Yeah, in LA, definitely met some interesting people out there when I was living out there.
All right, cool. And you still play music in New York?
Yes, yeah, I'm in Long Island. Do you know New York at all?
I wish I would have told you. I was just there 2 weeks ago. One of the films I'm just finishing up is called Prefab, and it's the last story about the Beatles to be told about how it all began. And so
awesome.
The story is about John Lennon's very first drummer, this guy named Colin Hanson. And Colin is very unique. He's in his 80s now, but he flew over. He was there for the screening, and he's a very unique individual because Colin is the only human being on planet Earth who was there the day John fell in love with rock and roll. He was there the day John met Paul, and he was there the day Paul introduced everyone to George.
Wow.
And for about 2 years, it was John, Paul, George, and Colin in a group called the Quarrymen, and Colin was a drummer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when is that coming out?
Well, it's done. We're making some final tweaks to it, and more importantly, we're just trying to find it a home. It took us about 2 years. I'm sure being in the music business, you can appreciate this, but there's about 70 songs in the film that we needed to research and get cleared, and so it took
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it took 2.5 years to like get it cleared, and
it took quite a while, I'm sure.
Yeah, because some of the songs, you got to research where they're from and who owns the copyrights, and they're all over the world, really. Paul McCartney owns quite a bit of them. Some of them are Beatles songs, and he owns the Buddy Holly collection. So when he came on board the film, he was very helpful in not only helping us get access to the music, but keeping the cost low, I guess is a good way to put it.
Right.
So that was very grateful. I'm very grateful for that, because honestly, the movie, it's kind of nonstop music. I mean, you when you watch this movie, you're getting to grow up with these guys in Liverpool, post World War II, and the whole movie is just driven by the soundtrack. And what I loved about it was I didn't go into it really as a huge Beatles fan, but I walked away with such a huge appreciation for who they were and their music, because their music, if you listen to the words or if you know anything about it, it just encapsulates like their experiences growing up. Every one of them is a story.
Yeah.
And even at the end of the film, which is one of my favorite moments in the film, we see Colin Hanton, the drummer, now in his 80s, just kind of walking the streets of Liverpool, taking the bus on his way home. And Paul McCartney's song Early Days plays. And you listen to that song, it's a beautiful song, but when you listen to it after watching all the movie up to that point, the lyrics just make total sense, and it's pretty amazing. So I'm really excited about that film, and we've had the chance to screen it at a couple different film festivals, but more importantly at Beatles Fest in New York a couple weeks ago. And I'm sitting in the back of the room watching it, and I'm like, I felt really proud, because I mean, it's a great film. It gets a ton of laughs. People cry, people laugh. At the end of the movie, people get up out of their seats and cheer because there's something that happens, which I don't want to give it away, but it's just this moment, like everyone goes crazy in this moment. And I'm sitting there thinking, like, I mean, and I'm not taking credit for it, because again, I'm the director of the film and the producer, but I really have to give credit to my producing partner, Mark Bentley, who came up with the idea for the story, because he's a huge Beatles fan. And I got to give credit to my editor, Dave Harrison, who was also a huge Beatles fan. Like it's the love and care that it's the guidance that Mark gave me into the subject matter, and it's the love and care that Dave took while I was directing the edit,
right,
to craft the film the way that it is. And I'm sitting in the back of the room, and I'm listening to all these cries of laughter and tears and cheers and everything. And I'm like, we've really done the Beatles and Beatles fans and the music industry and the music history a really great favor, because I don't think there's ever been a film that really just encapsulates this story so well. And
now, how would you compare it?
Lived it,
Yeah, how would you compare it to like Across the Universe, that Beatles movie?
I mean, there's a ton of Beatles movies, and when I got pitched the idea, I was just coming off my Star Trek NASA doc. I was just wrapping that up, and I'm trying to meditate and manifest what's next for me, career-wise, project-wise. And the Beatles come to me, and like my first thing was like, oh man, there's so many Beatles films out there. Like, what's left to tell? But this is such a unique point of view, and we were blessed to be able to film and capture original content from these surviving members who, since making the film, several of them have passed away. So like we really have preserved a piece of history by the people who have lived it.
That's amazing.
As opposed to like historians or talking heads or research or a narrator.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of history in there, but the majority of the film is told by people that were there and live in it, and that was the reason why Colin Hanton, the drummer, insisted on it. The film's based on a book called Prefab, written by Colin Hall, who is his dear friend in Liverpool. And also, Colin Hall is actually also the caretaker of Mendips. Mendips is the home where John Lennon grew up. And his wife, Sylvia, takes care of Paul's house, 24th Lane. So they're historians in their own right. But Colin Hanton and Colin Hall wrote this book. And Colin's motivation for writing the book was to preserve this history in its truest form, so that his grandkids would know exactly who their grandfather was and what their grandfather lived through, and how their grandfather was part of the seed that was planted to create the biggest band the world's ever seen.
Ever. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Wow.
When you think about
Sounds
it. And
unique. It sounds really interesting.
Everyone's so humble and sweet, and like they're just people, you know. But when you sit back and watch this movie and you listen to the reactions and you realize what you've done, like you basically have written like the best history book that could ever be written, you know, on the topic, and preserved it for all time. You know,
right.
I think it's why I gravitated towards films versus theater, because you can put a lot of love and sweat and tears into a live theatrical performance, but as soon as that show wraps, you know, it's a memory. Movies do last forever, you know, and I love that about movies. I think that's why I make films. I wanted to create something that could last beyond me.
Sure. Yeah, it sounds like in your films you really inject humanity, and it's interesting that one of your favorite movies is Star Wars, because we're kind of in that age of robots and AI, and these are tools that's being used to kind of aid in movie creation now, and I feel like that kind of strips away from humanity. So,
well, but you know, it's funny you say that, because when I did my other film, A Woman in Motion, which is the documentary about Nichelle Nichols from Star Trek and how she influenced NASA to bring diversity to the space program, that's a great story. And like, and again, I'm a Star Wars guy, so I came into the Star Trek story with very little awareness of Star Trek. I mean, I grew up on the movies. The TV show was like, for me, the TV show was an old black and white thing my dad used to watch on Saturday nights. My mom was off at church volunteering at bingo. My dad's making us TV dinners, and we got this little rabbit ear TV, and we're watching black and white Star Trek episodes. And it just, you know, it didn't resonate with me the way Star Wars did. But then getting into it and diving into the Star Trek world universe, you know, you have a whole new appreciation for this stuff. And you know, this phone is in the early episodes of Star Trek. I mean, from the 60s, you know, and the little flip thing, and then Dr. McCoy has what looks like an iPad, and then so it's like it's that old thing, that old pseudonym, if you will, like science fiction versus science fact, or how science influences science fiction and how science fiction influences science.
Sure.
It's so crazy, you know. Ray Bradbury talks about it all the time, and it's true, you know. It's like we get inspired, and I remember going to see Minority Report with Tom Cruise, and that scene where he's like, you know, swiping the board with his hands. And you know, a couple years later, we get the iPod, you know, the iPad.
That's that Philip K. Dick movie, right?
Yeah, you remember?
Yeah, I remember it. It's very good, very good.
Yeah, but it's amazing like how the technology is in there in advance, and sometimes it's the movies that influence like how we're living now. So I'm waiting for him to perfect that transport where you can just step on a pad and show up somewhere else like in a matter of moments.
Exactly. Yeah, imagine.
So that'll save me, because I'm always running 10 minutes late. So that'll save me.
So like, speaking of like kind of futuristic movies, The Matrix, it kind of has that theme of we're currently in a simulation kind of. Do you believe that's a possibility? Like, this is just,
I mean, yeah, dude, I do, man. It's like, I think in some twisted sort of way, I mean, there's a lot of truth inside movies like The Matrix, you know. There's a lot of thought that went into that, and it's all based on, it's crazy, man. It's like, and it all goes back to the Bible too, which is weird. It's like these ancient teachings, you know.
Yeah.
Even when I got heavy into meditation, it's like it's all in the Bible. And you know, I grew up Catholic. I should know it inside and out, and I don't. But yet, as I get into something like meditation, and you realize like this isn't anything, you think you're discovering it for the first time, but it's actually been around forever. And it's a shame that they don't teach it, or at least when I was growing up, you know, in school, they don't teach those things in schools, you know. They should. I mean, I think the world would be a whole lot better.
Be a lot different. Yeah.
Yeah, if we were all, you know, we're all energetically connected anyways, but if we can all just physically and metaphysically and through the mind connect to each other,
well,
I think
we all had that kind of like that spiritual connection.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have it, but it's like we're not aware of it is the problem, you know. Like if we could teach how to connect to that and understand where we come from, you know. I mean, you and I all three of us are from the same source, you know. It's like
yeah.
And then, you know, I was raised, you know, God's up here, the devil's down there. It's like, no, he's inside you, you know. And sin is just a choice, you know. It's a right or wrong choice you make, you know, and you can be forgiven for your sins, but the point is you've got the freedom of choice to like not do it to begin with.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of these things you just come to appreciate and realize as you get older. But I'm trying to raise our kids, just with that open mindness of like who we are and what we are and how anything's possible, and you can create the world you want to live in.
What's really interesting is the story you told about your grandfather and how he had the opportunity to be dishonest, but he decided not to. And I believe, especially in this digital age, it's really easy to get away with stuff, when nobody's looking. So,
Yeah.
Just making the choice to be honest when nobody's looking is really important, I feel.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
So yeah, just to dive in, it seems like you're definitely a man of faith, and you've taken some inspiration from biblical lessons. What are some of the bigger themes that you've drawn, say, from the Bible and implemented it into a film?
I mean, just your, I mean, at the moment, just your core principles of right and wrong, and just basic truths. I think, again, I think some of the most successful films are based on just simple principles. Even a science fiction film like Star Wars. I mean, the Force is just religion. It's basic religion
Yeah.
and faith, and good versus evil. I mean, so I think it doesn't have to be complicated. I think The Matrix was, at the time I first saw it, was complicated for me, but now that you understand certain things about life, it was the message is in there too. You just got to know how to. I mean, The Matrix did a brilliant job of making it complicated in a way, because that's how we sort of are. We're sort of walk into the world with blinders on, and we don't know what we're looking at, or we don't know how it all works. And they did a good job of making it confusing and yet trying to address something very basic and simple. So yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah, I definitely feel like like you mentioned, all of this is in the Bible, like even the Matrix, the simulation.
Yeah.
Like the Bible says, in the beginning was the word was with God. So me, I'm personally in software, I'm a programmer. And if you play video games like maybe like GTA, these programmers, they're creators, they create these worlds for these entities to interact in, and they use programming, which is a language, and just like the Bible, God used the word to create this reality that we exist in.
Yeah. Sorry, we had family come home.
Yeah, no issues. Yeah, we were kind of at the top of the hour. So yeah, did you have any last subjects that you wanted to cover before we get out of here?
No, I just really appreciate you inviting me on. It's been great talking to you guys, and just parting words of inspiration. Never give up on who you want to be. Just, it could be anything. It doesn't have to be entertainment. It doesn't have to be acting. It doesn't have to be filmmaking. Anything you want to do in your life, it's possible. I mean, I look at, I've been blessed with some of these stories and telling with people like Nichelle Nichols and Colin Hanson from the Beatles, or from the Quarrymen rather. They're all, the reality is they're all just normal individual people, but it's like, it's their actions that spoke louder than their words, and what they did, whether they knew it or not, is what inspired and drove us to the next level. So, I just want to leave anyone listening to this to know that, anything's possible. And the most important thing is that you believe in yourself. You have faith in yourself.
Absolutely. Brian, did you have any final question?
I guess just maybe a quick point to make. Back when I was spending some time out in Los Angeles, I ended up meeting this really famous actor. And, we were talking about music, we were talking about film, we were talking about how, breaking into the industry. And he said, well, look, man, like this took me 20 years of hard work to break in. And he said, even then, after those 20 years, he had to have someone take a chance on him. So he really, narrowed in on that fact that yes, someone does indeed have to take a chance on you for you to break into the industry. How could you speak to that at all?
Yeah, actually, I have a great story to tell you about that. So last year I got to work with, are you guys familiar with the show called The Chosen?
I don't watch too much TV. You know that, Brian?
No.
Yeah, Chosen. It's a biblical series. Angel Studios puts it out, and it's basically the story of the Bible, Jesus, and it's I think they're on season 6 or 7 now, but it follows Jesus from birth all the way up to the resurrection and everything. And so, anyways, the actor that plays Jesus is this actor named Jonathan Ramey, and he was a very he was a struggling actor in Hollywood, and was down to his last $20 or $40, one of the two things. I couldn't remember exactly what it was, but he took himself out to dinner and with his last $20 and just said a prayer to God, like, hey, thanks for my time in Hollywood. And obviously it wasn't meant to be. And was just taking himself out to a dinner before he went back to his apartment, and he was going to leave the next day to go back to where he's from. And that's when he got his phone call to be on The Chosen, to play Jesus on The Chosen. And it like literally changed his life. And
Wow.
it's just such a cool story because, again, he's a sweet guy. And it's humbling to know that no matter who you are, there's struggles in life. But I think it's how you deal with those struggles and how you embrace them and how you interpret them is what makes a difference. I'm doing a film right now on Walt Disney, and I had the pleasure of being at Roy Disney's house last month. And I was just there for a day, and I was with Roy's grandson, Roy Patrick, and we had time just to hang out and grab a coffee. And he was just telling me, the Disney family was in bankruptcy like their whole life. You don't think about it. I mean, it's $1 billion company now, but I mean, their dream and their vision for what they believed in and what they wanted to create, it cost them everything all the time. And it wasn't until years later that they started to benefit and profit from their business. But, it's hard to, get your arms around that because, you look at Apple today or, Amazon or Disney. I mean, these are all people that started these companies and just believed in themselves. And some of them started in a garage, some started in a little shoebox office, selling books. Somebody started, just because their daughter was riding a carousel in a dirty old park and he wanted someplace to go for parents to take their kids where everything was clean and nice. And so it's these visions that people have that are amazing, but it's the journey and the true struggle that they go through to get there, which is to me very fascinating and very humbling. So, again, when you wake up in the morning, you're having a bad day or things don't seem to be going your way, like you just got to have that belief and faith in yourself, because if you don't, nobody else will.
Yeah.
And you have to stop and think, like, how many things have we missed out on in life because somebody did give up? Somebody did choose not to stay in line. We could be living on Mars right now. Maybe somebody gave up, or somebody, died in the Holocaust that was supposed to get us there, because of something stupid we did here on Earth. And you really wrap your head around that, and that goes way beyond the Matrix storyline. It's like crazy.
Yeah.
But it's interesting how life can be, and you just gotta my number one thing is just continue to have faith in yourself always
and keep going. Just
and
the
keep going and never give up. Yeah,
the consistency. Yeah.
Recognize your drive as your God-given gift and talent, and make the most of it every single day.
That's great advice.
Yeah, amazing, man. Before we get out of here, where can people find you at? Where can they connect with you?
You want me to give out like my home address? No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah.
No, just go, just on my website. It's my site is starsnorth.com, starsnorth.com. All my film projects are there. And, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook as Todd Thompson, but, it's actually, I am Todd Thompson, the letter I, the letter M, Todd Thompson. But yeah, Stars North is where all my projects are. And it's my, keep making films under that label.
Absolutely, man. It was amazing having you on, and whenever you want to come back, let us know.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Nice to talk to you guys, and keep on what you're doing too.
Yeah, man. It was very enjoyable having you on. We had some laughs, and we got into some pretty deep philosophical topics, I feel like.
Oh, it was fun for me. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.